Wade this week, everyone who believes in abortion rights started brainstorming the ways to preserve abortion access in the face of the most powerful and definitive move yet to strike it down. Some urged people to donate to abortion funds. Some called on the FDA to make it easier to access the abortion pill. Some said now is the time to mobilize voters for the midterms. The Senate is even holding a vote on Wednesday on a bill that would codify abortion rights before they are overturned by the Supreme Court. However, Democrats know they do not have the votes to overturn a certain Republican filibuster in the Senate. And even if they did, this Supreme Court, constituted the way it is, could ultimately overturn whatever got passed. So with all this in mind, some just went straight to the one solution that could actually fix the problem of a Trump-stacked conservative supermajority that has overtaken the Supreme Court and seems intent on erasing generations of personal rights. Changing the composition of the court, specifically by adding seats. This would dilute the power of the arch-conservatives who are about to overturn a nearly 50-year precedent and a fundamental right upon which the current functioning of our society has been built. Several lawmakers are already on board with that idea. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren said, quote, "End the filibuster, codify Roe v. Wade with a national law protecting abortion rights, expand the Supreme Court, stop this horrifying injustice in its tracks." The Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said, quote, "Overturning Roe would put the lives of women across the country at risk. It would fly in the face of decades of precedent and the overwhelming majority of public opinion. And they will not stop here. Expand the court." New York Congressman Mondaire Jones said, quote, "To my colleagues, it's not too late to support the only policy that would restore sanity to the broken court. It's not too late to add 4 seats. Getting very specific about what expanding the court would look like. Joining me now, Melissa Murray, professor of law at NYU, former law clerk to Judge Sonia Sotomayor, and MSNBC legal analyst. Also, Mary Ziegler joins us, abortion law and Supreme Court historian, a professor at UC Davis Law School, and the author of several books, including her latest, Abortion and the Law in America, Roe v. Wade to the Present. Welcome to both of you. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Professor Murray, let me start with you. Expanding the court packing, as people who don't like the idea refer to it. The warning has been that if you do this, you affect the legitimacy of the court. It politicizes it. Supporters would say the court has been politicized now, and this may be the only fix. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you're right. The horse is out of the barn on this one. When you have an opinion being leaked like this, when you have justices whose spouses are allegedly sending text messages to the White House on the day of an insurrection at the Capitol, I think we already have a quite politicized Supreme Court. And this didn't just start this year. I mean, we can go back to 2016 when the Republicans stalemated that open seat that President Obama was entitled to fill. It goes way, way back. But the real question here is, if you want to rebalance the court by expanding it, how are you actually going to get that through this Congress? For the same reasons you can't get the Women's Health Protection Act through Congress, you're not going to, and you can't end the filibuster, you're not going to be able to get this through as well. So the real question here is, can you sustain this kind of energy through the midterm elections, which had been predicted to be a loss for the Democrats, and instead use it to actually be gains so that you can actually do some of this domestic work that you want to do, whether it is passing the Women's Health Protection Act or ending the filibuster or doing something that accrues to the benefit of the court in terms of its reform.
Professor Ziegler, let me ask you 2 questions then. Can you do this? Can one expand the court without delegitimizing the court? And is this the job of the court, to get things done that can't be done legislatively?
Well, I think you could add justices to the court without delegitimizing it. I think, if anything, we know historically that the legitimacy of the court, or at least the perceived legitimacy of the court, depends on its feeling something other than partisan. We know this in part because Gallup polling suggests, which has found the courts at its all-time low in terms of public approval since polling has started, and that seems to be connected to the perception that the court is partisan. So balancing the court so that its decisions don't have a clear partisan hue, so that its decisions aren't predictable ahead of time because of who's on the court and who put them there, would likely change public perceptions of the court for the better. And we know that we could add justices to the court with different people in Congress. I think, as Professor Murray said, it's just a question of how we get that done, or if that's possible. And that really depends on the midterms. We know also from polling that Americans, while they have complex attitudes about abortion, don't seem to want Roe overturned. or want the kinds of bans we see emerging from the states. And so if that's right, the question I think really for progressives is how do you operationalize that, right? How do you get people to actually act on what appear to be their views about abortion and about Roe, rather than deprioritizing the issue? And I think we'll see if they can do that in the upcoming midterms.
Professor Murray, Mondaire Jones talked about expanding by 4 seats. That's a common thought, going from 9 to 13. But what Professor Ziegler talked about avoiding a clear partisan hue, what else would you fix? If you were fixing it at this point, if you were saying, all right, it makes sense to expand the court maybe by 4 seats, is there something else you would do to say, and this is what we do to make sure that for generations going forward, we can rebuild the trust that the public has in this court of not being partisan?
Well, academics have floated a number of proposals about court reform, and it's not simply just expanding the court. There's also been proposals about limiting terms for justices. That seems to be actually quite sensible and has gained a lot of traction with the public. In the recent Supreme Court commission that was supposed to examine the court and not make recommendations, but simply provide assessments, there actually was some appetite, even among that very large and diverse group of commissioners, for limiting the terms of justices so that each president would have an opportunity to appoint at least one justice during her term. There are other things that we might do, including limiting the jurisdiction of the court in terms of certain kinds of topics. So, for example, there's already been legislation that limits the court's jurisdiction.
In 2 miles, take exit 8B on the left for I-580 East toward downtown Oakland, Hayward.
Has also suggested maybe limiting the court's jurisdiction in places like voting rights, places where the issues are particularly acute and you really want them to be decided using the political process.
I'm going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. I want to have more of this conversation after the break. You're watching Velshi. We'll be right back.